Hello everyone and welcome back to another video of English No Big Deal. My name is David.
And I'm Maddie.
And so in today's pronunciation teaching video for Conversation 9, we're going to switch up the way that we do it a little bit as opposed to the way that we did for all the previous conversations.
Rather than reading every single line again, we're going to just pick out 15 phrases or vocabulary words, and we're going to go over their pronunciation, usage, and lastly, give you guys some examples.
Of course, the example section has to be at last, because after you get all the points of how to pronounce those phrases or words correctly, we're going down to the second section of its usage, where you pick up on how to use them correctly in your real-life situations. Also, the third one is going to be where you put everything you understand for these particular phrases and words into good use or practice by practicing along with us while watching this video.
Now jumping in to the very first phrase. Have you ever changed something with something?
So, have you ever changed the windshield blades before for your car? I'm so confused right now because I don't know if I should just change the blades or I should change the whole windshield wipers. So what do you think?
The first pronunciation point is the connecting between have and you. We'll say, have you, have you.
For the word have, we have the final sound as the v sound, right? And you starts with the y sound. And then when we link them all together, we'll have you, have you. So be careful when you link it right here. Don't ever turn the V sound into an F sound and say, have few, have few. Don't say it like that.
Otherwise, that sounds very odd.
Exactly. Also, we have another phrase, I love you. And for this particular phrase, native speakers won't say, I love you or I love you. So let's ask Maddie how she says it.
I love you. I love you.
Right.
You.
I love you.
Now that that point is clear, going on to the next pronunciation, changed. Changed. That final sound has to be very clear.
And the reason it has to be clear is because these sounds are voice consonants. So if you are a beginner of English, you might find it really challenging to connect these sounds together, especially when it's coming at the end of a word like this. But try to say it separately and slowly at first. When you're getting used to it, you can speed it up and say it exactly the same way that native speakers say it in their natural daily conversations.
Don't get the voiced CH sound mixed up with the voiceless CH sound. So for example, don't say changed, changed. This sounds very odd. So again, make sure that both sounds are distinctive. The jd, jd, and the cht, cht.
Even when you say jd, jd, it may take you a little bit of time, and it sounds really odd to native speakers. But like I said, if you're a beginner, your point is to make your sentences a little bit more clear, and you don't have to worry about how odd it is, rather than being wrong by saying changed. Cht, cht.
It's better to build up good habits now rather than creating bad habits that will be hard to break later.
Alright, so some of the words or verbs in English that end with a CH sound, and you guys should probably use Oxford Dictionary in order to determine whether it is a voiceless CH sound or a voiced CH sound. And the reason you should do it is because you will be able to determine whether the ED part is a voiced or a voiceless, or in short, it should be a T sound or a D sound. So we have the example of the word change when you add an ed part at the end in order to turn it into a past tense verb or past participle. Then we'll have changed. But let's make one example of a word, of a verb that ends with a voiceless ch sound, like the word watch. And so let's ask Maddie how she says the word watch when it has the ed part at the end.
Watched.
Alright. You hear it, right? Watched. And don't ever say watched. Don't ever say it like that. Alright, now if all the pronunciation points are clear, let's move on to the second section. It's usage.
The first thing we have to figure out is what tense the sentence is in. The tense is important because it determines how the verb will change. So the tense of the sentence is in present perfect tense. So with the present perfect tense, how are you going to change the verb?
The verb that's coming after a subject is supposed to be a past participle. For a lot of verbs in English, if they are irregular verbs, then it's gonna be a little bit challenging for you guys to figure out which one is past tense, which one is past participle. But for all the regular verbs, they're gonna follow exactly the same rule, that in order to change the verb into its past tense, or in order to change the verb into its past participle, all you have to do is to add the ed part at the end of the verb, exactly like the way that we have for the word change. And when you turn it into the past tense, it's going to be changed. But for its past participle, it's going to be the same thing as well. Changed.
To give you guys some more examples, the irregular verb go. What's the past tense of go?
It's went.
And what is the past participle of go?
Of course, gone.
Good. And the next one, how about come?
So its past tense is going to be came, and its past participle is going to be come, going back to come.
And one more irregular verb, hit.
Wow, this one is a little tricky because its three forms are going to be the same. Hit as in the present tense, hit also the past tense, and its past participle is also hit.
Be careful with this one. Do not add ed at the end. Nobody says hitted. Sounds so weird. Okay, now that all of that is clear with the usages, we'll go on and create some examples for you guys. First example, have you been to New York before?
It's like you have a friend, whether that friend is living in Vietnam or some other country, and you're basically curiously asking them if they've been to New York because it's such a large city, and you want to ask them if they have already been there before. You're asking them if they went there at some certain point in the past.
And I'll give you another one. Have you come to New York before?
Have you come to New York before? That also means that now you're living in New York and you're asking that friend if she or he has ever come to New York, the city that you're in.
The thing is, when you use come, you have to make sure you are in the location you are talking about. Now, one last example. Have you ever hit your sibling before?
Wow, this example sounds pretty brutal. Don't ever hit anyone. This is just an example of how to use this particular sentence or question using the word hit. Notice that the word hit that Maddie is using for her sentence is past participle, is not in the present tense, and it's also not in the past tense. Hit can also mean that when you reach some certain point, let's say your boss is asking you to hit some targets of sales, you can also use that. Or if somebody is giving you direction And that person is saying, after you hit that intersection, you see the light. Then that means when you see that intersection, you can also see the light. Alright, if everything is clear for the first phrase, have you ever changed something with something? Now we're moving down to the second one. And what is the second one, Maddie?
Swap something with something. Yeah, I've done so many times before. I think you just swap the old blades out with a new set, which can be done without having to get the car serviced. The pronunciation you need to be careful with is the word swap. Sound. Even though it's written with the A, don't say swap. Swap. Sounds so odd. Swap. Swap.
I remember when I first came here to Canada and my friend was using that word with me and I couldn't understand because I usually said it as swap. And that was a very bad mistake because when I said it to my friend using the same word, he didn't understand.
So how is this going to be used?
So when it comes to its usage, you guys should keep in mind that for the verb swap, it can be both transitive and intransitive. And if it is an intransitive verb, then it doesn't take any object. So after the word swap or the verb swap, you have to use an adverb or a preposition. That's why we have the phrase swap out something. So Maddie, can you explain a little bit about how we can use the phrase swap something out? Swap out something.
So when you swap out something, that means you're replacing the same exact thing with something new.
Swap out something or swap something out. In the situation that swap is a transitive verb, that means it takes an object coming after it. Let's say a coach in a game is swapping his players, or it's now winter, so it's time for us to swap the tires. Notice the tires or the players are coming after the word swap. That's why swap in these phrases or sentences is used as a transitive verb. Alright, is there anything else that we should keep in mind when it comes to using the word swap, Maddie?
One thing we should keep in mind is swap when it's used in a passive voice.
Passive voice is used when you use the verb be or get that is followed by a past participle. It depends on the main verb that you want to use for that particular sentence. But in this situation, we're talking about the verb swap. That's why I'm going to give you some of the examples of how to use the word swap for its passive voice. When it comes to winter, you have to swap out your tires, right? So you swap out your tires. Let's now change it into a passive voice sentence. We'll have the tires are swapped out by you. Or the tires get swapped out by you. Notice the word swapped. I added an ed part at the end of the word swap, but keep in mind it's the past participle, exactly like the way that we talked about for the word changed. Now let's go over some other examples. What is the first one we have, Maddie?
One example, it's time to swap out my phone. Meaning, I want to replace my old phone with a new one.
Or we're in the middle of a game and the assistant coach is telling the main coach to swap out some players just because they look exhausted.
Now that swap is clear, let's go on to the next phrase. Get the car or something serviced.
Perfect. Now I know that I can do it myself. But I still think that I need to get the car serviced because it's getting old.
The pronunciation point that you need to know here is get the. Get the. So the T here in get is stopped and the word the is more clear. Get the. Get the.
Another good pronunciation point is upon the word serviced. 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 Remember how we talked about how to use passive voice for the verb swap? So we use to be verb or the verb get. And after that is going to be a past participle. So that also means in this situation, the word serviced is in its past participle form. So serviced, and remember, is all voiceless.
Great point to make. Now that all the pronunciation points are clear, we're going to go over the usage of this phrase. So when you get something serviced, you typically use it when you're talking about something mechanical. For example, the car, the AC unit, or even a furnace. All of these require special skills in order to clean them, update them, or replace something. That is why we'll use serviced to get it serviced. Giving you a few examples. Again, I got my car serviced.
When you get your car serviced, of course, you can't do it yourself. That's why you need some technicians or people that are specialized in taking care of your car.
Exactly.
It's complicated, so you can't do it yourself. Getting your car serviced. Another example can be furnace, like you said before. I'm trying to get my furnace in the house serviced.
I'd be too scared to touch my furnace. That's why I would go to a specialist to get it serviced.
Not only that, if you are just the owner of the house, you don't have all the necessary equipment in order to clean it or upkeep it.
One thing to keep in mind is we would not say, I got my hair serviced. Hair is not something that is mechanical. It's not something that is overly complicated. So you would not use this phrase with hair.
Or anything related to your body, like your teeth. You can't say, I'm trying to get my teeth serviced, or my body serviced, or my nails serviced.
If you say that, you might get a funny look from somebody like, huh? What are you talking about?
Maybe you are in the middle class or high class in order to have some special maintenance for your stuff.
Oh my goodness. Now that everything is covered for the phrase get something serviced, moving on to the next one, the phrase falling apart.
And some of the parts are like falling apart.
What's the pronunciation point to be careful of with this phrase?
It's obvious with the word falling because it has two ways that you guys can pronounce it. The first way is the most normal way. You can just say falling. But for the second way, you drop the G at the end and say it fallen. Fallen apart. Fallen apart. Fallen apart. It's basically more native that way when you say it fast, but keep in mind, don't say it quite often because you might get into some bad habit of dropping the G sound at the end of every single word or verb that has ing.
One thing to keep in mind is that when you are dropping the G sound, don't make that final sound too enunciated. Don't say fallen, fallen. Otherwise, you sound like you'll have a Southern American accent.
Which is also good, but is not highly recommended.
We're teaching North American accent, and that's why it's important to make sure that that sound is not enunciated too much. One other thing that we can do with this phrase is connect the final sound of falling or fallen to the sound in a part. Fallen apart, fallen apart, or falling apart, falling apart. It is more common amongst North American native speakers saying fallen apart, fallen apart. So just keep that in mind. Both ways are correct, but fallen apart is more natural.
Because it helps you say it faster.
It does.
Right. Alright. Now let's get down to its usage. So when something is falling apart, or if something falls apart, or if something fell apart, it depends on the tenses you're using here. That means that thing is becoming old and it can still work, but it's not going to last for long anymore. Soon enough, you're going to have to replace it with a new one.
Exactly. So we'll give you some examples to give you an idea of how this phrase is used. So one example, my car is falling apart, meaning I can still use it and it can drive, but it won't last long and I'm going to have to buy a new one.
Right. Also, that car can certainly stop on you.
Exactly, and that's not going to be a good thing.
It's not going to be a good thing. It's getting old and it's now time for you to get it replaced with a brand new car.
But until it's time to get it replaced, you can say falling apart until your car finally falls apart. So another example, my house is falling apart.
You definitely don't want to live in that house, or you really have to do some maintenance for that house right away because the house is falling apart. That means it's getting old and it can collapse anytime. Or some of the some of the things in the house or items in the house that are not working properly anymore.
Leaky pipes, broken lights, anything you can imagine. It's probably time to renovate your house if it's falling apart. And one last example, my bed frame suddenly fell apart. That means it's completely broken. I already have to go and buy a new one. This phrase can also be used to talk about a relationship. So two people in a relationship, maybe they're no longer together. You would say their relationship fell apart.
Right. Maybe something like a conflict has happened and that depreciates their relationship and how good it used to be. So phrase number 5, all of a sudden.
Oh, what happened?
All of a sudden, I couldn't start it to go home from the office yesterday. So I ended up having to call a car technician to see if I could fix it myself. So for the pronunciation point for this phrase, you guys should keep in mind that you should connect all the final sound together with the upcoming word in order to make this phrase flow as if you are pronouncing just one word. All of a sudden, all of a sudden, all of a sudden. But this phrase is actually used when something happens all of a sudden or suddenly, unexpectedly, and normally it happens in a very bad way. So that's why you want to embed a little bit of your emotion into saying it. You would say, all of a sudden, all of a sudden. So usually I would stress the word all of a sudden, sudden, and all of a sudden. How about you?
I would probably stress the word sudden. All of a sudden, all of a sudden.
For the word sudden. So there are 2 ways, technically, to pronounce this word. You can also say sudden, or you can also drop the D sound and say sudden, like a majority of native speakers in North America.
Exactly. Most of us would say sudden. Sudden. Now that I think everything is clear and covered for the pronunciation of this phrase, let's move on to its usage.
Like I said before, this phrase is used when you talk about something has happened unexpectedly and suddenly. And out of the blue is also a similar phrase with this one.
All of a sudden is an adverb and usually appears at the beginning or the end of a sentence. For example, all of a sudden, a deer jumped out in the middle of the road. I could take this same example and change the positioning of the phrase. A deer jumped out in the middle of the road all of a sudden.
That means the deer decided to jump out in the middle of the road without you expecting it to happen. Alright, so it happened suddenly and unexpectedly. Out of the blue.
Exactly. Do you have any other examples of this phrase?
Of course I do. The company went bankrupt all of a sudden.
Ooh, that's a bad one.
Exactly, it's a bad one because nobody is expecting the company to go bankrupt. Also, you can put the phrase at the beginning of the sentence saying, all of a sudden, the company went bankrupt.
I like that example.
Right. Keep in mind for this phrase, you can also use the phrase out of the blue. So instead of saying the company went bankrupt all of a sudden, you can also say the company went bankrupt out of the blue. Out of the blue. That means you didn't expect that.
Exactly. Number 6, to see if.
So I ended up having to call a car technician to see if I could fix it myself.
The pronunciation point for this one is to see, to see. We don't say to see. We change to ta, to see, to see.
Another pronunciation point for this phrase is upon the word if. So when pronouncing the word if, please pronounce it with a short E sound and not the long one. So please don't say to see if, but please say to see if.
It would sound pretty odd if somebody said to see if.
Exactly. So, alright, so now the pronunciation points are all clear. Let's get down to its usage. So, when are you going to use this phrase, Maddie?
This phrase is used to mean that something has to happen so you can find out, figure out, or know something. Keep in mind, do not take this phrase in a literal sense. You are not literally or physically seeing something. The best way to understand this phrase is through examples. To provide you an example, I have to ask my mom to see if you can come over. If I just suddenly brought my friends over, Mom might be mad and I would get in trouble. So it's best to see if she's okay with them coming over.
And the fact that the phrase has the word if doesn't mean that it follows any of the conditionals. So make sure that you understand that something has to happen if. But it is not following any conditionals right here. So something has to happen before you figure something out. Alright, let's give them some other examples. Let me go first. You gotta go to the company to see if they're still hiring people.
Ooh, I like that one.
Right? So right now, do you know if they're still hiring people?
No, I have no idea.
You gotta go there in order to know if they're hiring people.
It's best to go in and talk to them if you want a job. So that's why you have to see if they're still hiring.
Or this phrase can also be used when you are at a store and you're asking a staff there if you can do something. Let's say, yeah, I'm here to see if you have this particular dress, something like that, to see if. But it also follows exactly the same rule because I'm here. The fact or the first action has to happen first. That means you're here. Because if you're home, then you're not going to see anything. Number 7, something acts out, or something is acting out, or something acted out.
Wow, very versatile.
Of course, because with this phrase, you can actually use a variety of tenses with it.
I'm no mechanic, but I don't think it was your battery that was acting out. Getting into the pronunciation points, the first one, act. Both the K and the T sound have to be very clear. Kt, kt. Do not drop a single one. You don't say act or ack. They both have to be there. Act, act.
And it depends on the tenses and the verb form you have when using this phrase. The pronunciation is going to be changed as well. So let's say you're using the word act, the verb act, in its present tense. So it's going to be I act out or he acts out. But when you use this phrase in its past tense, it's going to be acted out. Acted out. And then acted, it ends with the final D sound, and you link the D sound to out. You have acted out. So he acted out. She acted out. They acted out. Or I acted out. And also, you can use this phrase with present continuous. So, he's acting out. She's acting out. They're acting out. Or I am acting out. With the word acting, you can drop the G at the end and you say actin, actin. And now the word actin ends with an N sound and you link it exactly the same way that we linked for the D sound when we have the word acted, right? So now we have actin and then acting out. Acting out. She's acting out. He's acting out. They're acting out. I'm acting out.
Mm-hmm. How this phrase is used is to describe something that is misbehaving. It's not acting normal. It's not behaving in a normal way, and it's really unexpected for you.
Exactly. Something you don't expect, and now, just because it happens, it irritates you a little bit.
For example, my car is acting out. My car might not be working. It's not starting. The windshield wipers are not working. It's not acting normal. My car is acting out. Another example, my daughter's acting out since she's been home from school.
Maybe she got bullied while being at school. Or maybe she got a really low mark from the teacher.
So in this sense, she's misbehaving. Not being normal. Maybe she's being mean to her siblings. Whatever it may be. She's misbehaving. She's acting out.
Or you can also use this phrase with your stomach. If your stomach is acting out, that means you are having the feeling of vomiting. And so you're feeling sick and you don't feel good with your stomach.
Keep in mind, we don't say, for example, my head's acting out. So this phrase would only typically be used with just your stomach, no other body part.
Because if you use this phrase to describe about your head, if your head is acting out, that means it's broken. And nobody wants their head to be broken.
Number 8, in a rush. I love this phrase.
I do love it too. I think I accidentally left the glove box wide open while trying to get some of the documents out. And I was in a rush, so I forgot to close it.
So, in a rush, the pronunciation point that you need to keep in mind is inna. It's said like one word. Inna.
Also, when it comes to this phrase's pronunciation, make sure you pronounce the sh sound at the end of the word rush. Rush. Please don't say Russ. Russ is wrong. So in a rush. I think for the pronunciation of this phrase is pretty clear. Let's get down to its usage.
So in a rush also has similarities with in a hurry or in haste. And all these mean is you are having a time constraint and you have to go fast or do something fast.
Because you're running out of time.
Exactly.
Let's say you are going to work in the morning, but just because you got up late, so now you're running out of time and you're in a hurry and you forgot some of the documents that are also important to the meeting that you're going to have the first thing in the morning at your company. And so now you're in a rush or you're in haste or you're in a hurry.
All those are great examples.
Right.
Another example, I'm in a rush to make breakfast. Maybe you woke up late or something happened and you have to make breakfast fast. You can't go slow, otherwise it'll throw off other tasks. So you're in a rush to make breakfast. Another example, I was in a rush to get to the hospital. Something like an emergency happened and you have to be fast. You don't have an option to stop or slow down. You are in a rush to get to the hospital because it's an emergency. Number 9, the entire time or the whole time. That's it. Your car ran out of battery because you left the glove box open the entire time. What's the pronunciation points that we need to look out for this phrase?
Entire. So the sound at the end of the word entire is exactly the same way that the word tire has. So tire and entire, because I know that a lot of non-native speakers would probably underestimate the sound at the end of the word entire, and so they'll say entire, and it's not going to be correct. You have to say entire. And also, the word entire, entire, the first syllable of this word has to be with the short E sound. So entire, not entire, right? So the entire time, or the whole time.
Really good points to make. Pronunciation for this phrase is pretty clear, so we'll go on to its usages. When you say the entire time or the whole time, and you're saying this expression to somebody else, that means both people know the time period. There are 2 points in time that are very clear.
Right. It's exactly like, since you arrived at this office, your car was left on the entire time. When to when? Of course, it started from the time that you arrived at the office. And to the point that we're talking about that right now.
So when it started and when it ended.
Exactly.
Another example we'll give you is, my leg has been hurting the entire time we were running.
Both parties in this conversation already know when they started running, and now all of a sudden she's saying her legs been hurting, and so everybody knows that time period. Number 10, a big deal, that big of a deal, or no big deal. But I thought it wasn't a big deal. So these are the expressions that are really commonly used in North American English or even in British English. And so let's get down to its pronunciation points. So, no big deal. Of course, everything is really easy. But for the word big, make sure that you distinctively pronounce the g sound of the word big instead of like the k sound, as in big, big. I don't know what that word means, but don't mix up between g sound and k sound. No big, big, big. Deal, deal, deal. So the word deal is pronounced with a long E sound and the L sound at the end. Try to make the O sound. D-O, D-O. And when you say it fast, it's going to be all jumbled up as deal, deal. No big deal. That big of a deal. How about that big of a deal?
That big of a, is connected. Big of a, not that big of a deal.
Alright.
Big of a deal.
So you link the sounds, especially the g at the end of the word big. Big of a, that big of a deal. That big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. And the last one is no big deal. Is such a casual way of saying no is not a problem.
Pronunciation here with this one also is pretty clear. Each word is distinctive. No big deal. Now that the pronunciation's covered, let's go on to the usage. The way this phrase is used is to talk about no problem or not a problem or not that big of a problem. So take big deal and think of it as the word problem in this case.
If a friend is asking you, hey, is it gonna bother you or something if I ask you to help me something? And then you'll say, no, it's no problem.
I could also say it's no big deal.
It's no big deal, right? So big deal means problem. So no big deal means no problem.
Exactly. And we could also say she made a big deal.
Out of something.
That means she created a problem out of something.
But it isn't necessarily the way that everybody perceives it.
She must perceive it a different way than the rest of us.
Exactly. So it seems easy for everybody, but it seems to be a problem for her.
And so that's how big deal is replacing problem in this example.
And these phrases are most likely used in a negative sentence. So you say, is no big deal, is not a big deal, is not that big of a deal.
Another example, it's no big deal to ask for help. It's no problem to ask for help. Both of these mean the same exact thing.
Or learning English is no big deal.
Ooh, our name?
Exactly, that's our English Center's name. So when you say learning English is no big deal, that means it's easy, it's not a problem.
Pretty straightforward now.
Mm-hmm.
Number 11, to save somebody money on something.
I think you just saved me a lot of money on a new battery, Maddie.
The pronunciation points for this one. Save, the v sound. Be careful and not to change it to a f sound. Don't say safe. That means something completely different than save.
Let's move on to the next one. It's usage. So when you say to save somebody some money on something, that means you're doing something or you're giving them some suggestions or advice, and that person is changing their mind of buying or affording something, and by not spending the money, they're actually saving some money. And so you're saving them or that person money or a lot of money on something.
Keep in mind, don't change on to for in this situation, because then that also changes the entire meaning. If you save money for somebody, that means I am making money, saving it up, and then giving it away.
Yeah, for that person to afford it.
Exactly. So be careful here. Use on instead of for.
And so if I'm saying, I'm saving you a lot of money for your college, what does that mean?
Ooh, you're gonna give me money.
Exactly. So I will work my butt off in order to save enough money, and now I'm giving you all the money for you to go to college.
What a great friend.
Exactly. So it's probably not gonna happen, but it's just one example. But now we change the preposition for into on, then it's gonna most likely mean a totally different thing. So I'm saying, I'm saving you a lot of money on going to college.
Oh, so you gave me some advice. That way I'm not spending as much money as I would.
Exactly, because going to college is going to cost you a lot of money. And my suggestion can be, no, don't go there because you're not going to have a job after your graduation, or, you know, you can also go for a real job and start earning money as opposed to taking you 4 years, 3 years, 2 years, be in college.
And if you're in the US, going into student debt. So you saved me some money on going to college. So those are the two different meanings, and just changing the preposition changes the entire meaning. Are you going to give me some money?
No, I'm not going to.
Oh. A few more examples of save money on something. I saved money on having to get my nails done by not doing it at all.
So cutting your nails short, and you don't have to go get your manicure and pedicure.
So I don't spend the money at all. I'm not spending any money. So I'm saving money on not getting a manicure, not getting my nails done.
Just because you're talking about your nails, so I'm talking about hair as well. So if you cut your hair short, you're gonna save yourself a lot of money on shampoo and conditioner. That means you don't have to buy a lot of them because your hair is short.
Yeah, you're lucky. Sometimes we also use this when we find something cheaper. For example, I saved a lot of money on my groceries because I found this new store. That means this store is selling groceries for cheaper, so I'm not spending as much money as I would someplace else.
That's a very good example and usage.
To end up or wind up doing something or in a situation. Don't worry, I had the same problem so many times before, and I ended up having to ask my dad for some insights.
This phrase is really awesome because native speakers, especially actresses and actors, are using this phrase a lot in their movies.
I've also heard it quite a few times in day-to-day conversations. So if anything, this one's definitely great to take note of. Now with that, let's go on to the pronunciation. To end up. The D is connected to up. End up.
Also, wind up. You also link the D sound at the end of the word wind and link it to the word up. You have wind up. But when it comes to pronouncing the word wind, make sure you enunciate the N sound that's standing just right in the middle of the word wind. Wind. Don't ever say wide. Wide. It's wrong.
If you say wide, that means something is big. It's wide. Means something completely different than wind.
Now let's get down to its usage.
So to use wind up or end up, this means that you've done everything else possible in that situation, but in the end, at the end point, there's only one option left. There's no other options that you have. So if you end up doing something, that means that's the only option that you've got.
You don't have any control over it. Let's say I was born in a poor family, so I ended up having to find a job at the age of 13. Something like that.
That means you had no other option. You could not do anything else but go find a job. That was the only thing that you could do. Another example, I ended up having to buy a new battery. The only option you have is to go and buy a new one.
And another point when it comes to the usage of this phrase is after the preposition up, you have to use the verb with ing. Let's say, I ended up having to buy a new battery, or I ended up having to find a job at the age of 13. You see the similarity right there? All the verbs that are coming after the preposition up, they all have the ing part at the end.
Another one, I ended up buying a new battery. You can take out having and put buying right next to it and just changing it to ing. I ended up buying a new battery.
Or if you don't want to use any verb that's coming after the preposition up, then you can use in a situation. Maybe that situation is a bad situation because you have no option or no choice.
We've been using end up, but what about wind up?
It depends on the tenses that you guys would like to use. If you use wind as in the present tense, you say, I wind up being in that situation. I mean, the usages are remaining the same, but be careful when it comes to its past tense. So wind will turn into wound. So I wound up being in that situation, or I wound up having to find a job at the age of 13.
So the main thing to keep in mind is the tense with this one.
Exactly.
I wound up getting sick because I was in the cold all day. Number 13, it depends on how. It depends on how reputable the technician is. Some may tell you the exact same thing my dad told me, and others may take it as an opportunity to make some money, or some may even try to rip you off. The pronunciation for this one that you need to keep in mind is depends on. That Z sound connects with on. Depends on. Zon. Sounds like one word. Zon. Depends on.
You might find this have a lot of variants that can be used in a variety of situations, but in this particular situation, we're talking about it depends on what, it depends on how, it depends on why, and something like that. So something is going to happen depends on something else, and we're talking about that.
Going back to our example that we had in the conversation, it depends on how reputable the technician is. So with this phrase, and the thing we're depending on is whether or not the technician is good or bad. So if you have a bad technician, he's going to make you spend more money. But if you have a good technician, then you're not going to be spending as much. You're going to be spending way less.
And this phrase is powerful when you use it in a situation that you are not sure or certain about some certain thing, or if it's going to happen the same way that other people are asking you for. Let's say your boss is asking you to arrive at the office on time tomorrow, and you're saying it depends on how bad the traffic is, right? It depends on how bad the traffic is.
Do you know how bad the traffic is going to be tomorrow? No.
Not yet. That's why it's a very good way for you to pull off some situation when you're not certain about some certain thing happening in the future.
So with the response that you gave to the boss, saying it depends on how the traffic is, you're not giving a definite answer. You're not going to say, yes, I'll be there for sure, or no, I'm not going to be there. You're saying it depends on. So if traffic is great, you'll be there. If traffic is bad, you'll be late.
Forgive me, because I already tell you in advance. Another situation can be when you arrive at a store or a shop and a staff there is asking you if you want to buy something from the store. And you're saying, no, it depends on what you have, but you're not certain yet, right? So that gives you an opportunity to go around the shop or the store to figure out if you are interested in some products they have there.
Yeah, so you're not telling the staff, like, for sure I'm going to buy something from here. Or you're not saying, no, I'm just browsing around. You're leaving the option open.
Number 14, rip somebody off or rip off somebody.
I really like this phrase.
I do like this one too because it's pretty handy.
And others may take it as an opportunity to make some money, or some may even try to rip you off.
So, in terms of the standpoint of this phrase's pronunciation, we have to talk about the word rip. So, its vowel is, make sure you guys understand this, is the short E sound and it's not the long E sound. So you can't say reap. Because when you say reap, what does that mean, Maddie?
That means something completely different than rip. If you reap something, that means you get the reward. You reap the reward.
Or you collect the crop, or you harvest the crop.
Yeah.
Right? You reap something because you have already planted it.
Because no one will say, you reap somebody off. You reap somebody off.
It's gonna be really bad. And another point of this phrase's pronunciation is the linking sound of the P sound at the end of the word rip to off. If off is coming after, right after the verb rip. So you say rip off somebody, or rip somebody off is another usage, but we have to go over the usage right now. So, Maddie, can you talk a little bit about the usage of this phrase?
So, if somebody or something is a rip-off, or you rip somebody off, that means they or you are spending more money than you should for a product or a service. So we could go back to the example of the technician. If you have a bad technician, they will rip you off for their service because they're making you spend more money than you need to.
And keep in mind that this one is a phrasal verb and is exactly how any other phrasal verbs work. If you want to use it with a pronoun and you have to use the object form of this pronoun and it's going to be standing just right in the middle of the word rip and off. So you can say rip him off, rip her off, rip them off, or rip it off. You can't just say it the other way around. You can't say rip off them, rip off her, rip off him, or rip off it. You can't say it that way. If you want to be more specific, talking about somebody or people, then you can also say rip off people or rip off somebody. Or you can also say rip people off rip somebody off. Just a little bit of the note on the object form of the pronouns.
And now that we know that when you rip somebody off, that means you're making them spend more money than they should, we'll give you some examples, and this should deepen your understanding of this phrase. So for example, I could say, this hairstylist is known for ripping people off. So this means that the hairstylists are making people spend more money for either their services or their products than they usually should.
When you arrive in a strange country or a foreign country, when you are there, you don't know the products and how much the price is gonna be. That's why it's most likely that the sellers are going to try to rip you off. And so another example can be, when being in a foreign country, please go with a local if you don't want to be ripped off.
Exactly.
Notice the difference from the way that Mari used it? So, be ripped off or get ripped off. We're using the phrase in its passive voice. Same as the very first one that we have talked about before for the word swap. Get swapped out or be swapped out. In this situation, for the word rip, we have be ripped off or get ripped off. Make sure that you say ripped, ripped, ripped.
And the last one, number 15, with a grain of salt. Well, it's not all of them that are doing underhanded jobs. You just need to take their recommendations with a grain of salt.
This phrase is not actually a phrase, it's an idiom. And so let's jump right in the first point of the pronunciation of this idiom, Maddie.
So I think the first point that I want to go over is a grain of salt. Grain of. That N sound is brought over to of. Nov. Nov. Grain of salt.
So for the word grain, make sure you don't turn its vowel into a or a. Don't say gran or gran. It has to be grain. It aims out the A sound, grain of salt, grain of salt. And for the word salt, even though the L sound is standing in the middle of the word salt, you still have to roll your tongue and make that L a little clear.
You can't say salt, salt. So like David said, roll your tongue. Alt, salt.
Salt.
That's very important to make sure that sound is really clear.
Alright, so we have its usage, and can you just talk a little bit about that?
Okay. I love this one because what this phrase means is when you take something with a grain of salt, that means you're taking the information that somebody's giving you with caution, mainly because it can cause harm. So we'll give you some examples. One example, you have to take the information from the realtor with a grain of salt. So what that means is the information the realtor is giving you, she might be in it for money, and so you have to take the information she gives you with a grain of salt. Otherwise, you might end up spending more money, and this can be harmful to you.
Another great example for this idiom can be, everything has its two sides. That's why you have to take information with a grain of salt.
That's actually a really great general statement because it does hold a lot of truth. Like you said, everything has its two sides. There's two stories to everything. So info you receive should be taken with caution, with a grain of salt. Those are all of the 15 expressions, phrases, and idiom for Conversation 9. And I hope that you guys find this information that we've given you helpful. And now you understand fully what happened in Conversation 9. So everything's really clear. And I hope eventually you will be able to use these expressions in your own daily life.
After watching this video and you guys have had a chance to practice along with us for all the phrases and the examples, you should probably go back to the conversation video and rewatch it to see if you can understand it better this time.
Another thing that I would suggest you guys do is go back through all of the phrases and try to make your own examples, because this will only deepen your understanding of these phrases and you might be able to actually pull them out in an actual conversation.
Make sure that you practice with these phrases a lot, because practice is key. And as long as you practice a lot, you're going to be able to use it within your natural conversations with somebody.
Now that you know all of the phrases' meanings and their usage, this should help you in the next video, where I will be asking you guys 15 questions for Conversation 9.
And of course, in order to answer those 15 questions, you have to understand the meaning of the conversation video. And so make sure you watch it until you understand it. And also, this is the very first video that we changed up the way that we talk about pronunciation points, usage, and also examples of some of the phrases or most important expressions in our conversations. And so if you have any questions or concerns, please leave them down in the comment below and we'll make sure to go over it and give you the best answer we can. Your comments would mean a lot to us, because we need extra opinions so we can improve the quality and the helpfulness of these videos, so we can best help you achieve English at home or through online.
Alright, that concludes everything in today's video. I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye!
Bye!